Hello, everybody. Today I'm back with a new video mostly about lockdowns, hospitalizations, and the job that the federal government has done in managing this pandemic. These lockdowns are no longer about stopping the spread. They are, and they have been for a while now, all about control and power. Because the government has seen that what this emergency, this sanitary emergency, has brought them the power that they so that they how can I say this that they so much want, that they get drunk on this power. So now they're trying to find ways to keep these lockdowns and these restrictions in place because they like how they can control the population with these lockdowns. So if people have been following the videos I've been making, they know that I've shown many studies on how lockdowns don't work in stopping the spread, and they are the main reasons for loss in businesses, loss in the economy, people losing their jobs. The cause is the lockdowns and not the pandemic itself. So in the Foundation for Economic Education, they review a study, and I'm going to give you a bit of the article here. Lockdowns had largest impact on destroying economic activity. A new paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that enforcement of mandatory restrictions appears to have driven the collapse of sales in California. The world may be nearing the end of the coronavirus pandemic, at least we can hope, but the post-mortems are just beginning. A new paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research found important correlations between sales, losses, and lockdowns across counties in California. Economists Robert W. Fairley and Frank M. Fossen used state data from all taxable sales in California during the first 2 quarters of 2020, finding a drop of $152 billion in the second quarter alone, a 17.5% decline from the previous quarter. Not all business experienced losses, of course. Some businesses deemed essential saw gains, such as pharmacies, liquor stores, supermarkets, agriculture, and building material and garden equipment stores. Many economic sectors were not so lucky, the authors found. Leading the way in sales losses was the accommodation sector, 91%, followed by bars, 86%. Entertainment venues saw sales drop 83%, while full-service restaurants saw a decline of 61%. There's no reason to believe the numbers wouldn't be close to these numbers here in Quebec. Because, by the way, California has probably, at least in the United States, has the strictest lockdown measures, and they have other strict measures like curfews and no indoor dining, which I think they have loosened up in the recent days or week. So this is basically the reason for these losses in jobs and businesses. It's about the lockdowns, not about the pandemic itself. Small shops selling gifts and souvenirs, clothing or books also experienced large losses in the second quarter of 2020. The authors concluded, none of these results are particularly surprising, but the authors also identified something else important. Namely, they found that the decline in sales during the pandemic stemmed primarily from government lockdowns and other restrictions, not voluntary social distancing. Important to note. The results of our research suggest that local implementation and enforcement of lockdown restrictions and voluntary behavioral responses as reactions to the perceived local COVID-19 spread both played a role. The economists state, but enforcement of mandatory restrictions may have had a larger impact on sales losses. Mandatory restrictions may have had a larger impact on sales losses. Did the virus kill the economy or the government? There's no question the U.S. experienced an economic recession unlike it had ever seen before, highlighted by a 33% GDP drop and 22 million jobs lost. The economic crisis is unprecedented in scale, Brookings Institute scholars wrote in a September paper. The pandemic has created a demand shock, a supply shock, and a financial shock all at once. So basically, this is what they are stating in this study, is that the main reason for people losing their jobs, for people committing suicide, for people losing their businesses, restaurants, bars, gyms, whatever they may be, is the main reason for it is the lockdowns and the curfews and the sanitary measures. Well, not the sanitary measures in itself, like the mask and social distancing, but the the authoritarian measures of lockdowns, forcing you to stay in your house, of curfew, of things like that. That's the reason people are losing their jobs and businesses. Okay? So here I'll show you another recent study published January 5th, 2021, okay, in the European Journal of Clinical Investigation. So this is a respectable scientific journal. Okay, let me read you just the abstract. Background and aims. The most restrictive non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs, for controlling the spread of COVID-19 are mandatory stay-at-home and business closures. Given the consequences of these policies, it is important to assess their effects. We evaluate the effects on epidemic case growth of more restrictive NPIs, which we'll call MRNPIs, above and beyond those of less restricted NPIs. The methods they used. We first estimate COVID-19 case growth in relation to any NPI implementation in subnational regions of 10 countries: England, France, Germany, Iran, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, South Korea, Sweden, and the United States. Using the first difference models with fixed effects, we isolate the effects of MRNPIs by subtracting the combined effects of IRNPIs and epidemic dynamics from all NPIs. We use case growth in Sweden and South Korea, two countries that did not implement mandatory stay-at-home and business closures, as comparison countries for the other 8 countries, 16 total comparisons. The results: implementing any NPIs was associated with significant reductions in case growth in 9 out of 10 study countries, including South Korea and Sweden that implemented only IRNPIs. Spain had a non-significant effect. After subtracting the epidemic and IRNPI effects, we find no clear, significant beneficial effect of MRNPIs on case growth in any country. In France, for example, the effect of MRNPIs was plus 7%, 95% CI minus 5 to 19%, when compared with Sweden, and plus 13% when compared with South Korea. The 95% confidence intervals excluded 30% declines in all 16 comparisons and 15% declines in 11 out of 16 comparisons. Conclusion: while small benefits cannot be excluded, we do not find significant benefits on case growth of more restricted non-pharmaceutical measures. Similar reductions, NPIs, similar reductions in case growth may be achievable with less restrictive interventions. So in this study, what they say is that lockdowns do not stop the spread in case growth. And that even in their conclusion, they state that similar reductions in case growth may be achievable with less restrictive interventions. With less. Let me be clear about this. Okay? That similar reductions in case growth, meaning the number of cases going down per day, may be achievable with less restrictions and lockdowns. So that's what this study says. Now let's move on from studies and go into the fear mongering that the media and the government do to keep that power that they want to keep, because everything is about power. Okay? In the Montreal Gazette, full lockdown measures could return if variants take off in Quebec. So basically, since the cases are going down, hospitalizations are going down, they need to find a new reason to keep these restrictions in place. So now they're going to tell you that if there may be a return in new variants, which that will cause lockdown measures to stay in place. Okay? So it says over here, some measures will be lifted Monday, but Dubé, that's the health minister, warns a return to lockdown is possible if screening shows significant presence of new variants. It's funny that he says that if screening shows significant presence of new variants, but they refuse to make public these datas and these screenings that they have, these documents that they have. Because if they would release them to the public, then the public would know the charade that is going on to keep the power that they absolutely love to have. So basically that's what they're doing. The article basically just says some ad nauseum about about how new variants can be dangerous, and that the lockdowns, even though they're loosening up some restrictions, that they could come back in place. We are following very closely the evolution of the new variants in Quebec, Dubé said at a press conference in Montreal on Friday. We are worried about this, but we are being very, very, very vigilant. Dubé said, "It's a race against time. We want to slow as long as possible the progress of this new UK variant." Okay? No need to continue reading. You get the gist of what the point of this article is. This is an article written by a journalist. Now let's go to an opinion piece in the CBC. More fear mongering. If we're serious about building a healthy post-pandemic society, we can't do without addressing poverty. Okay. Pandemic makes it clear that no one in society will truly be protected until everyone is protected. So what they're saying is, until everybody is immune, nobody is immune. So the lockdowns must stay in place until everybody is immune. And that's just plain impossible. It will never happen. Scientists, there's a certain, I'm not saying a full consensus, but a certain scientific consensus, that the virus will not go away. It is here to stay. So there will never be 100% protection to the population in general. And yet, they don't want us to go back to normal until there's full protection for the population. That's just never going to happen. So are we going to stay like this forever? I'm asking the question. It's an important question to ask, because the population deserves the right to know if they will be locked down for a very long period of time. Some people say into 2022. I've even heard some experts, quotations, saying maybe into 2023. Are you ready to stay like this? The way people are losing their minds? Just hear about that the story in Pennsylvania the other day about the man killing his neighbors, the wife and the husband, because of a snow removal fight during a snowstorm. He came back and he shot the wife and the husband, and then he went inside the house, get a bigger gun, and finished the job. This is people losing their minds because of these lockdowns and this pandemic. And we deserve a right to know how long it's going to last and what's the plan going forward. So let's move on from this one, because this is an opinion piece. I don't need to read you all. The opinion piece's goal is just to further put fear in the population so they accept these authoritarian measures. Okay? Here in the La Presse, some experts, again, under air quotations, Quebec is going too rapidly with is loosening of restrictions. Some experts worry. So who are these experts? Let's just go into try to find out who these experts are. Okay. Dr. Matthew Otten, specialist of infectious disease at Hospital General Jewish. So I guess, yes, he's a specialist in the infectious disease. But he's no expert in epidemiology or psychoanalysis of people, how they're dealing with these lockdowns. So his opinion in the spread of the virus and what helps stop it is useless to me. So let's move on to another La Presse article. Here, in this article, it shows how it's affecting a whole generation of students. Our future, basically. Okay? That they're saying that failures in high school are skyrocketing. Especially in, what did they say? In French and math. So in linguistics and in mathematics, kids are experience extreme failures in these departments, in these subjects, if you will. Kids, especially kids, even though humans in general are made to socialize and have to socialize, kids, it's even more important for them. That's how they develop their social skills that they will use later on in life. And we are prohibiting them from learning these skills so they could succeed in life. Do you understand that? Is that what you want for the future generation? For your kids? And the future of everything, of government, of everything, how they will run, the people that will be in power in the future. This is these people, if this the next generation, we are ruining them completely and setting them up for failure in the future. So this is in the La Presse. You go look it up if you want. Okay? So let's go into a bit of hospitalizations, okay, and the new cases. So in the strongest part of the pandemic, the government, and this is from this graph is from the government website, Quebec provincial government website. They had said that one person can spread the virus from 3 to 5 people, and that's why it was so dangerous, and that's why we had to go into lockdowns. Well, now it has gone down to less than 1. So one person will give it sometimes to nobody, but in general will give it to less than 1 person. So if you get me correctly, if I get the virus, I might not give it to no one, or at the most, I might give it to 1 person. Okay? So this is the graph. You see here, it's at 0.91. Here, the same thing. That was December 31st at 0.08. Okay. So now let's check these new measures today, the new statistics of today. So in infections, we have 826 more infections. We have almost minus 500 active infections. So we're losing the number of active people out there in the community. Okay, I'll even tell you a number that not many people talk about, is how many people have recuperated from the virus in one day since yesterday. That's 1,291, so almost 1,300, 1,300. Hospitalizations, we have lost 29 hospitalizations in one day. We're at 940. Minus 15 in intensive care. So that's the problem where people say, well, experts, the government, and Dr. Marquis, celebrity doctor from Télé-Québec that also works at Maisonneuve-Rosemont, says that the problem was the overlapping of intensive care units. Well, we lost another 15 people in the intensive care that have left in the intensive care units, and we now sit at 145 people in all of Quebec in intensive care. Okay? So let's go look at the numbers of those people that are in the hospital, separated by age. Okay? So, under 10, here, the site is donnequebec.ca. It's a site from the Quebec government. So, less than 10 years old, we have 2 people. Okay, 10 to 19, 3 people. 20 to 29, 13 people. 30 to 39, 22 people. 40 to 49, 31 people. 50 to 59, 95 people. In the 60s, 151. In the 70s, 262. In the 80s, 252. And then we see that as they get older, after the 70s and the 80s, the cases go down in the hospitals. The hospitalizations go down. And in the 90s, it's 109 people. So, we see that a vast majority of the people in the hospitals are for over 65. Well, from 60 to 90. So in that age gap is where most of the people lie in the hospitals. So these things that these people that were saying that more and more young people were getting sick and going to hospitals is total BS. It's just reasons to further scare you so they don't lose their power. Again, power. It's all about power. Whether it's this pandemic, whether it's government officials wanting to higher taxes, everything's about power. Critical theories, everything is about having the power. I want to be clear on that because it's very important. Okay, now I'm going to make you listen to Pitbull's opinion on these lockdowns. It's very interesting. I appreciate his opinion on this. So guys, here you go. Have a listen.
I'm hoping that people see as quick as you get it. It's like dope money. Come quick, leave quicker. So when it comes to this technology, exactly what it is. You got instant gratification thing. You can touch as many people with it as quick as they want to go. Whoop, they can pull it from you. And right now we're talking about a virus. A virus, that's what we talk about. SARS, MERS, bird, swine, Ebola, now Corona. Like, come on, folks. I mean, you gotta read the tea leaves, bro. The devil's in the details. And with that said is, if you look at the recovery numbers on what we're talking about, I don't know what it is, but I guess the flu went on vacation on this year. Heart attacks went on vacation this year. Everything went on vacation this year when it came to, I'm talking about, what we're going through right now.
Okay.
And let's just call a spade a spade. And the reason I can have this conversation is because my family comes from communism. They fled communism. They had everything taken away from them. Everybody got murdered. Everybody got killed. And that's the reason me, being a first-generation Cuban-American, or maybe us, being first-generation Cuban-Americans, I look at freedom and I appreciate that shit. I appreciate opportunity. I appreciate anything that you give me. All I need is a little slip, partner, and I got you. And that comes from the fact that when a Castro took over everything, and I'm looking at what's going on right now, the only person here that's hot, 38 hot, is Castro. He's going, y'all did it with a virus? Shit. Y'all took over the world with a virus? Y'all gotta be kidding me. He had missiles pointed to the United States of America during the Russian Missile Crisis, during the Bay of Pigs and what they went on through. So this shit gets deep. The only thing is do you want to realize how deep it is? You know, that's the way I look at this shit. And even going into this, I don't know if y'all know about this, but might as well put it out there, especially in y'all show, because y'all got folks that need this more than anybody. We all need it. There's a rehearsal that went on before this whole shit is called Event 201. October 18th, 2019, this shit came out. It was ran by the Johns Hopkins University, which is in cahoots with Bill Gates, Melinda Gates Foundation.
So here you go, folks. This is Pitbull saying it straight up, spitting straight facts on how probably one of the
day and age, I'm hoping that people see as quick as
that, saying that probably one of the people in the world, well, now he's passed away, but that would be the most impressed with how governments were able to control and acquire control from their populations would be Fidel Castro. Something to ponder, folks. Okay, moving on. And the Event 201. Quick word. If anybody, at the start of this pandemic, I talked about this. It was in March or beginning of April. I talked about this, how this rehearsal went on. It's not a conspiracy. It actually happened. There's even a website that you can go look at the videos and basically the schema that they used to rehearse an upcoming pandemic, which ended up happening a few months later. Okay, now let's move on to a New York Times article about a vaccine passport, saying that since they can't force by law because of the Constitution, whether it's in the United States or here in Canada, they can enforce mandatory vaccinations. They will enforce it through private corporations in bed with governments, just like they did big tech in censoring certain voices that they don't want to be heard. So basically, it's because it's against the law to ban free speech or force vaccinations onto the population. They will use private corporations in bed with the government and the politicians to enforce these unconstitutional measures. And in this case, it's the vaccine passport. Okay? Among governments and those in the travel industry, a new term has entered the vocabulary: vaccine passport. One of President Biden's executive orders aimed at curbing the pandemic asked government agencies to assess the feasibility of linking coronavirus vaccine certificates with other vaccination documents and producing digital versions of them. So to be clear, you will not be able to travel, and I'm sure it will be implemented in other venues, like sports venues or concerts or anything in those avenues, that you will not be permitted to do unless you show proof of vaccination. Now here, let me be clear on this. I have no problem for now requiring a negative test to travel. It seems perfectly reasonable, and it doesn't infringe too much on our civil liberties, basically our rights. But in the long term, require vaccine passport and confirmation? Man. That's a dystopian future I do not want to live in. But I digress. Let me continue. Now let's go into this narrative that they were pushing in the media, saying that nurses are so overwhelmed that they're quitting in droves because of the way they're being overworked. Well, here we see that 4,000, okay, in the La Presse, we see that 4,000 nurses have left the public sector for the private sector. So basically, they're leaving the public sector to go work for the private sector, which treats their employees much better. And even though in our health system here in Quebec, we don't have a big implemented private sector, we still have private agencies, and they get contracted by the government, who therefore pay much more, these private agencies, for them to send them nurses. So the question I ask here is, why are these nurses leaving the public sector to go to the private sector? I don't know. I'm asking the question. So if any of you know, all of my friends that are out there that are nurses, please enlighten me on this, sorry. So they say 43% rise in resignations in the nurses. And in the meanwhile, private placement agencies have seen a rise. So the problem here is basically the nurses leaving the public sector, and that's what's making the health system vulnerable. Because they're not leaving because they're overworked or they're getting sick. In these cases, a lot of them are leaving to go to the private sector. Okay, so moving on. So now, let's go into the federal government, Prime Minister Trudeau's management of this pandemic. In the Macleans, the numbers are in. Canada's COVID fighting efforts are among world's worst. Every day, 130 Canadians die. Our economy staggers. We are failing to properly respond to COVID, and it may only get worse. The first step is admitting you have a problem, so let's do that. Canada is doing a terrible job fighting COVID. How terrible? The Lowy Institute, one of Australia's most respected think tanks, is tracking pandemic metrics to gauge the performance of 98 countries as they respond to this global crisis. You know where Canada ranks, folks? Canada ranks 61st out of 98. We are behind countries like El Salvador, Belarus, and Myanmar. So, this tells you everything you need to know of how the government, the federal government, and Trudeau are dealing with this pandemic. Completely incompetent. And does the media report on this? Not at all. Especially not the CBC. Especially not Globe and Mail. The Toronto Star. They would never report on this. I'm even surprised that Maclean's is reporting on this. I'm sure he got pushback from the editors. But I must give them props and credit where credit is due. They published it. So let me just read one more article. And the Lowy rankings do not yet take into account vaccination rates. Oh, they don't even take into account the vaccination rates, folks. And you know what the vaccination rates are? Well, here we go. I'll show you right now. Here we go. Sorry, my dad must have called me. Okay, so vaccine rollout watch. Out of 34 countries, Canada is 30th in the percentage of people vaccinated of the population. First is Israel with 58.53% of the population. Canada is at 2.7%, or 2.7 people out of 100 people are vaccinated. Countries that are in front of us, Greece, that went bankrupt a few years ago. Portugal, a country of 10 million people. Lithuania, you see the pattern here? Just like the article in Maclean says, Canada is 61st amongst countries of how they dealt with the coronavirus pandemic without taking into account vaccination rollouts. And if you do take into account, well, Canada's 34th out of 34 in the vaccination rollout. Interesting, isn't it? Now let's go look at another measure of the federal government's job in dealing with this pandemic. In unemployment, what we here in Quebec call chômage, Canada is at 9.4% of people unemployed. European Union, 7.5. United States, 6.3. The average of the G7, which is the 7 biggest countries economically wise, in the world, 6%. We are the worst in the G7 in unemployment. So Trudeau thinks that just by throwing money at things is gonna help things and make things better. In your lives, how many times has money saved you from something or made a bad situation better? I'm sure it happens. But is it an automatic solution to a problem, just throwing money at it? I don't think so. Now, going into something that I've been saying, and I'm going to keep on repeating because it's important, that this virus is not going away, and we must learn how to live with it. In the Time magazine, we may never eliminate COVID-19, but we can learn to live with it. When does a pandemic end? Is it when life regains a semblance of normality? Is it when the world reaches herd immunity, the benchmark at which enough people are immune to an infectious disease to stop its widespread circulation? Or is it when the disease is defeated, the last patient is cured, and the pathogen retired to the history books? The last scenario, in the case of COVID-19, is likely a ways off. If it ever arrives, the day where we will be eradicated from this virus. The virus has infected more than 100 million people worldwide and killed more than 2 million. New viral variants, even more contagious than those that started the pandemic, are spreading across the world. And though highly effective vaccines were developed and deployed in record time, it will be a mammoth undertaking to inoculate enough of the world's population to achieve herd immunity, especially with the new variants in hot pursuit. Already in many countries with access to vaccines, logistical hurdles, and vaccine hesitancy have proved to be formidable adversaries. Meanwhile, many nations in the developing world don't have access to vaccines at all. So this goes back to some people claiming that until everybody is protected, no one is protected. Well, that's just never going to happen. And this is the Time magazine article depicting how that is just not going to happen. So we must learn how to live with it. It's not me saying it this time. Even though I've been saying it for months, it's Time magazine. Now, in the end of this video, I'll touch a bit on what I've touched on the last virus video that I made. How that some people, politicians, establishment executives are starting to push or taking advantage, of this pandemic to advance their political and ideological agendas. Here is an article in the Metro, February 8th, pleading for a greener downtown, affordable and attrayant. How can I say that in English? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So basically what they're saying here is that we should be using this pandemic, and you could go read it for yourself in the Metro newspaper, that we should use this pandemic and the opportunity that it's offering us to further the lockdown measures to protect our planet from global warming, let's just say. So are you ready to stay locked in your house indefinitely for many, maybe years, to keep from happening something we are not even sure we are going to be able to do, or that it's even going to work? I'm asking the question, are you ready to do that? Are you ready to lock down for the upcoming, I don't know what they want, 5 years, 10 years? I don't know. Look what AOC and Bernie are saying. Two prominent politicians from the woke left, I guess. Well, maybe Bernie's not too woke. He's a very hard progressive, but not woke. But AOC is definitely woke. AOC and Bernie are teaming up to get Biden to declare climate change a national emergency. And you know what that means? When you declare a national emergency, it gives you more power. Power to what? Power to lock down people and then get more power. And that's the vicious cycle you get in. You get more power. You want more power. You think. And these are all unintended consequences of their righteousness or self-righteousness, I may say. So these are politicians pushing for a climate change national emergency being called so they can have more powers in taking away your power or your freedoms or your rights. This is in the Vice News from February 4th of this year. Okay, folks? So this is basically it. All right? This is all about power. And these lockdowns right now are no longer about the pandemic. They're about conserving the power that they have gotten used to and that they fell in love with. Folks, we cannot, and I repeat, we cannot give them this power and let them take it from us. This is very important. And nobody says, and I'm not saying that the virus is not real, that it's a hoax. It's very real. People are vulnerable. People are dying. It's real. But we see in the pattern that the governments are using to further reason these lockdowns and authoritarian measures no longer make sense in a pandemic-wise. Because, like I showed you earlier in this video, the hospitalizations, the cases are going down. And I've showed you in previous videos how the pattern follows in every single situation, in every single jurisdiction, and in every single wave of this virus when it hits. So this is not about stopping the spread. This is about conserving power. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope to see you soon. Peace out.